Good evening. I'm Mark Sudduth, and welcome to day one of the 2017 Atlantic hurricane season. Tonight, during this special broadcast that is being streamed live on YouTube and Facebook, I'm going to take you on a journey through the technological evolution of our state-of-the-art hurricane coverage, plus, of course, we'll take a look at what the forecasts are for the hurricane season ahead, and talk about a few other things as well. You know, when I started Hurricane Track back in 1999, 18 years ago now, little did I know what it would become. Now, we can go live anywhere we want to. Back then, boy, we just wished for mobile internet. And now we can go live even in the harshest of conditions. Fast forward 18 years and the hurricane forecasts have certainly advanced, and the coverage that we do has as well. The advent of social media has allowed for the instantaneous sharing of every detail possible when it comes to tropical storms and hurricanes. Wow, what a ride it has been. And so, here we are again. It's hurricane season. Welcome to day one. So let's get started with a little climatology, shall we? This is where we are now, at the beginning. At the beginning of what should be a gradual and steady increase in activity over the next several months. Why is it like that? Why don't we have a lot of hurricane activity in June? Well, sometimes we do, but usually not. The last one was Hurricane Chris in 2012, the last June hurricane. A lot of it has to do with this guy right here. The old sunshine shining on the ocean and the heat that it builds up, that takes time, obviously. And as we can see, heat content in March, not very widespread. That takes time to build up. By the time we get to the end of May, there it is. It starts to grow. That ocean heat content that is so important for giving the energy to tropical storms and hurricanes. There's that lag. Kind of like when you turn the stove on and you put a pot on there, and it takes a little while for the water to boil. So does the ocean. Even though it's hot right now over land, it takes the ocean a little bit of time to warm up. It also takes time for the shear to relax. This is what became Hurricane Claudette in 2003 over the Gulf of Mexico, and those strong winds are very prevalent in June and July, and it takes time for the jet stream to retreat north and for things to kind of calm down in the atmosphere even as the oceans warm. And we can see that wind shear on these maps that are provided. This one's from the University of Wisconsin, and green usually means go, red is stop, and early in the season, this is the United States over here. Lots and lots of westerly winds. It just takes time for all of that to kind of settle down. And then we wait for the tropical waves to come off of Africa. This is a satellite picture from several years ago. It's not current, so don't worry. But these tropical waves, these bits of energy, these seedlings, if you will, they come off, and if they find the right environment, then we have something to track. So what will we be tracking this year? Well, let's take a look at the various forecasts. And we're not going to talk about any numbers particularly, more just a descriptive. NOAA, going with above average. Colorado State University released today with an update, roughly an average season. Tropical storm risk, they're looking at an above average season as well. And they're out of the UK, by the way. The Weather Channel, the Weather Company, above average season. Weather Bell, Joe Bastardi, Ryan Maui, Dr. Ryan Maui. Roughly an average season. It's hard to interpret exactly what they're looking for an ace around normal, so I call it normal or average. And then AccuWeather, curiously enough, going with slightly below average. We'll see if they end up being the outlier and end up being right. North Carolina State. How many of you knew that North Carolina State has a meteorology program? They do. And they are going with an average season roughly. Dr. Liam Che up there and his colleagues calling for about an average season. And then released today, the UK Met Office, United Kingdom Met Office, going with an above average season. And these folks seem to have the highest for the year, with an ace maybe well above 100, so we'll have to see about that. So this is what we're looking at. The consensus, generally slightly above average overall, maybe 12 named storms, maybe 8 hurricanes, something like that. But you know, as the saying goes, it only takes one. Now, Jim Williams, who I have been friends with for a long time, at hurricanecity.com, if you know his site, he's been around a couple of years longer than I have. I started Hurricane Track back in 1999, and Jim does city predictions based on a lot of statistical analysis instead of putting out numbers. And so I thought it was interesting and would be prudent to show what he's talking about. I think that's important because he follows this stuff. He lives down there on the southeast coast of Florida, so he has a vested interest. And he gives a very high threat this year to Nova Scotia, Alabama, Florida. Florida's a big state, so, you know, specifically Marathon, the Isle of Youth and Cuba, and then the Cayman Islands. A moderate threat to Long Island, Halifax, Antigua, Dominica, Cape May, New Jersey. Got a lot of followers from New Jersey out there. Montego Bay, Jamaica. Port O'Connor, Texas. Key Largo, Florida. Ponce, Puerto Rico. Sarasota, Florida. And so forth and so on. And he, if you want to know the details, go to hurricanecity.com after this broadcast, of course, and click on his predictions and read what he's thinking. He's got a pretty good track record of which cities would be vulnerable, and you can read about his methodology there. Again, like I said, I thought it was important to mention more than just what we typically hear about and hear from each season. All right, so the parameters that are in place for this year, and I talked about this on today's video discussion, this warm Atlantic over here is really, really concerning for a busy season. This is an anomaly map. It shows us the sea surface temperature departures from normal. And this very warm area, especially off the coast of Portugal and Spain, down across the deep tropics, if this holds, we could be in for quite an active season, and maybe some of the numbers that were issued today would be going up. We'll just have to wait and see. Remember, just as, you know, just to kind of point this out, 2005, as busy as that ended up being, we really didn't know it could be anywhere near that busy until August, and by then it was practically too late. Really, if you think about it, it was grossly under forecast. A little bit of cooling here in the eastern Pacific, but the main thing and the main driver behind, for example, Dr. Klotzbach at Colorado State's forecast is the absence of a significant or maybe no El Nino at all, and this warming of the tropical Atlantic through here that was not seen back in March. And if you saw today's video update, that was something else. The difference between what we saw in March and April and what we have right now. Also the subsurface. This is the animation. You have the top of the Pacific Ocean at the equatorial region here, and then about 450 meters deep at the bottom. And you can see how things have progressed until late May, and we just don't have that much heat content lurking in the the subsurface Pacific. You know, there are some positive anomalies, but they're not very strong. This shading here is just a half to a degree. This is 2 degrees Celsius, and that's it. You remember back in 2015, it was much higher than that and much broader. So the odds of an El Nino this season are slim to none. And we can see that. I know this is pretty bright, and it's hard to show up perhaps, but a lot of white behind it. But the Climate Prediction Center consensus, for the most part, is for warm neutral conditions, no substantial El Nino to speak of as we go forward. So I want to talk about, now that we think about what the season could be, what mistakes people make. All right? First of all, they talk about it's not forecast to hit here. When they say it, we're going to get into that. What does it mean exactly? I didn't think it would be this bad. I hear that so often. I go to talks for the public, at civic groups, etc., and people come up and they say, Mark, I just didn't think it would be that bad. How could you not think that? It's a hurricane. And then this one right here, really, that bugs me. I'll wait and see and decide tomorrow. The hurricane's coming, and then wait and see. So let's take a look at some of these things. People talk about that it's not forecast to hit here. They're standing around the water cooler and social media elsewhere, and they're saying, well, really good news. It's not forecast to hit here now. Well, let's look at Katrina as an example. So there's the eye. Fills up the Gulf of Mexico quite substantially back in late August 2005. And so if you're over here in the panhandle of Florida, the forecast track took it very close to New Orleans, and you might say to yourself, or Gulf Shores, Alabama, as an example, it's not forecast to hit here. You would be correct if you were talking about the center, the eye right there, the nastiest part of that hurricane overall, where the strongest winds are located, the radius of maximum winds, and more than likely the strongest surge right around here. But that's headed towards roughly New Orleans latitude and longitude at the time. People in Gulf Shores, Alabama, if they were thinking, well, it's not supposed to hit here, thank goodness, they were gravely mistaken. Because the influence of the hurricane is enormous. Even something smaller than this, like Charlie in 2004, where everything was much smaller, people say, well, it's not forecast to hit here. Well, if you live across the I-4 corridor, Hurricane Charlie moved right up through there. People that were trying to go to Disney World during that fateful day of August 13th, they remember. So that's a mistake that people make a lot. They say, it's not supposed to come here. You need to understand that a hurricane is a lot more than a dot on a map or a pretty graphic on television. It has a huge influence. And people in North Carolina remember that very much so, hopefully, from Matthew this past season, that Matthew did not make landfall in North Carolina, yet the flooding, as I'll show you in a moment, was substantial. You also have these, surfers like this, swells that come out. So it's not supposed to hit here. It's going to go between Hatteras and Bermuda. No problem. People don't cancel their vacation plans. They go along with the plans. They go to the Outer Banks, wherever, the east coast of the U.S. as a whole. It doesn't matter. And they say, well, it's not supposed to hit here. It's going to turn out to sea. So they go down to the beach. You got these big swells coming in. Absolutely, the surfers love it. I get it. But man, you take your little kids into this, or somebody that's not a good swimmer, and you can have problems. Rip currents and these big waves, all that energy crashing on top of you, back injuries, neck injuries, and if you're in the medical field, you know about this along the East Coast. It's not supposed to hit here. Well, that's true, but that behind me, folks, is a hazard. Keep that in mind. I'm going to wait and see what it does tomorrow. I've heard that so many times. I'm going to wait and see. Well, this is Hurricane Ike, storm surge video from one of our early generation unmanned cameras. And this is still 12 to 13 hours before it arrives. The eye. 12 hours before the eye comes in, and there's all kinds of debris and muck and surge and water in the road on the Galveston Island on the west end. This is at Bermuda Beach. We all should remember the stories of Bolivar Peninsula. That was cut off even sooner. This is before the landfall even took place. I'm going to wait and see tomorrow. I'm telling you, when you gamble like that, you're going to lose more times than not. You just have to, it's tough. I know evacuation's tough, but when you're asked to evacuate, told to evacuate, you don't want to be waiting to see if this is coming. And then you try to leave, and I'm telling you from firsthand experience, there's nothing more fearful than being stuck in water like that in a hurricane situation. You don't want to do it. So don't let that go talking about I'm going to wait and see what happens tomorrow. The other impact, flooding rain, far inland. People say, well, I didn't think it would be that bad. This is the Kinston area of North Carolina after Hurricane Matthew. Several feet of water from the Neuse River spread out. This was forecast days in advance from the Weather Prediction Center and the National Weather Service. I don't understand how people didn't know. I mean, they had Hurricane Floyd. I guess we got to do a better job talking about it on social media. People have a responsibility to seek out information themselves. They're not always going to be, they got that movie coming out this summer from Christopher Nolan, Dunkirk, and the scene in the trailer where they're dropping the leaflets to warn them that they're getting ready to be bombed into oblivion. We're not going to be able to do that for people on the coast for hurricanes. I don't mean to laugh about it, but what else can we do? Alerts on your phone, we do the updates. The Weather Channel does a great job. Your local TV stations, people say, I didn't think it would be that bad. I don't understand. I mean, it's all there. These inland threats are a big problem as well. All right, so what do we want to watch for this season? Well, what I'm going to be watching, will this El Nino ever come on that some folks have been talking about? We'll have to see. The Atlantic sea surface temperature profile, especially the main development region where all that warm water resides now relative to average, does that stay? Does it get stronger? Again, something to watch. These are the things that I will be watching. How much dry air? Dry air has been a big, I don't want to say problem because people generally don't like hurricanes, but if you're looking for hurricane activity, dry air is a big inhibitor, let's just say that. And over the last few years, especially 2013, 14, 15, dry air was a major inhibitor, especially in the deep tropics. So let's see how much of that there is and how that relates to instability. Right now, it looks like things are fairly normal in terms of the instability, which is related to the dry air, so we can monitor that. And I will talk about these different parameters on the daily videos as well. And then, this is huge. How much, if any, early season development do we get, especially in the deep tropics? If we get something kind of forming in the Gulf or the climatologically favored areas in June and July, then, all right, that's not necessarily a sign of a very busy season. But if we have development between Africa and the Lesser Antilles in June and July that does not get sheared apart or dried out, and they hold on and go on to become hurricanes as an example, then that would be a fairly robust signal that we're going to have a very long and a potentially dangerous season. So we're going to be watching these. These are the four things that I will be watching for. This doesn't necessarily mean this is right or wrong. It's just these are the things that I'll be keeping an eye on. Kind of like when you're watching the NBA Finals or whatever and they talk about keys to the game. Well, there's your 4 keys to the game, in my opinion, right there. All right, let's take a trip back in time. That is yours truly, 20-something years ago and quite a few pounds lighter, doing what I absolutely love to do, and that is collect data during a hurricane. I have always been interested in hurricanes. That's Hurricane Bertha in 1996, and I wasn't just wanting to be the guy out there standing in it trying to get blown over. You know, to each their own, right? I wanted to collect wind data. I wanted to contribute something back to the science and not just film it and not just be in it. And so that picture was taken right here in Wrightsville Beach. Hurricane Bertha was coming, and I thought, let me take my Davis anemometer down there, set it up. I had a little computer, the little weather computer that it feeds to. This is the drawbridge going to Wrightsville Beach, and let me just get something. I had almost no money, right? And it was right at the start of my career, so that's the best that I could do. As bad as it is for collecting wind data, it was better than nothing. And it was interesting because a lot of reporters came out and took pictures of me, and they were very excited. And I thought, this could be interesting. There's all these people down here reporting on the hurricane, but nobody really knows what the wind speeds are along the ground. And so I thought, maybe this is the start of something. Hurricane Bertha, that was it back in 1996. That wasn't my first hurricane experience, but it made a difference. Hopefully this will show up okay. I know it's kind of backlit. The very first vehicle, fast forward a few years to 1999, and we had an Isuzu Rodeo where we put the anemometer on top, and that was a much better way to record wind data. And then in 2003 we got the Tahoe, thanks to a really solid partnership that we had with Lowe's Home Improvement for several years, from 2001 until 2007. And the Tahoe became our flagship vehicle, very well instrumented with weather recording equipment and other gadgets on the roof. People call it the Ghostbuster truck or whatever. It's the subject of lots of laughter, but it's a very serious thing. It's our office on wheels, and it's still in operation. 420,000 miles later, that Tahoe still runs. Not as good as it did, but it's still there. So we took the old Isuzu and turned it into sort of a crash test dummy during Hurricane Ivan. We get a chance, watch that on our YouTube channel, and you'll see what happened. By 2005, we figured there's got to be a better way. And we can't keep leaving old SUVs out there, so we developed the first generation of the unmanned camera boxes that consisted, I kid you not, of a VCR underneath, a laptop of all things, right? We had to digitize that video from these cameras here using Windows Media Encoder, a Sprint 3G air card, which is right here, and then a giant battery that weighed 75 pounds to power everything. And then it took a couple of us to lug that around. I got ahead of myself. All right. The first deployment in a real hurricane situation was Katrina. And back then, we had to go get the boxes if we wanted to retrieve the footage. And we lost all of them during Katrina. It's a long story, a sad story for us. But Jim Williams at Hurricane City was feeding that video feed into his VCR down in Florida, and this is what it looked like.
Those winds are kicking in Mississippi right now. They're going to be kicking for probably the next tremendous gusts coming in here. Look at the water rising in Gulfport, Mississippi. We've been switching back and forth sources, finding out that New Orleans is having some major problems. We have major problems in Pascagoula and Biloxi. Unbelievable. We've had so many people watching this video right now.
So this is the first time that we deployed this in a hurricane, and you can see it was very low quality, square picture 4x3. The audio from Jim was his commentary as he was watching it. And thankfully he recorded all of that to a VCR down in his house, in his studio. Otherwise we'd have had no record. We had 3 different boxes, and we lost all 3 of them in the surge. But we kept going, and even through the years, 2012, we're setting up for Hurricane Isaac as an example. There's Mike Watkins and myself. These boxes were heavy. They were very difficult to lug around. We could only put 4 of them in the back of that Tahoe. To the side, I mean, you can see, it looks like you're hauling a trunk. Right? A big old luggage trunk or something, and it was very cumbersome. The laptop would do a Windows update. Hopefully my computer won't do that to ruin my PowerPoint. But it worked, and here we are setting up for Hurricane Ike, and there's that footage again. We had a viable option to us being out in the field, standing there holding a camera, trying to film this. And this was that option. It worked. It was low quality, but it did work for several years. Fast forward to 2015, everything changed. We got a Wi-Fi based camera from Logitech, 2 very powerful but small battery packs to power everything, 28,600 milliamp hours lithium ion battery packs, a mobile hotspot, 2 wires to connect everything, and it all fits into a box a little bit larger than a child's lunchbox. And it weighs 5 pounds. So we started testing. We thought we had something good. We have a bunch of them. I could put 20 of them in the back of the Tahoe if I wanted to. The first tests, the prototype here was a black case, was the winter of 2015 in Cape Cod, of all places. Mark, you're a hurricane guy. Why are you going to Cape Cod? Well, these blizzards up there, as you guys know, they can pack quite a punch, and we needed to test outside of a controlled environment, right? So I went up there and set the camera up in that brutal winter of February 2015, and this is the result. Time lapse, if this will play, it might not play, the time lapse that we got of the, well, this is Sassuat Harbor, and it froze through that winter, but the camera ran longer than the storm. It ran for over 30-something hours, and so the first test was a success. Afterwards, we started doing everything we could to test at any event possible. A weak coastal storm, it didn't matter. The hurricanes were few and far between. Great for coastal residents, but not so great if you want to try to test something for a future hurricane. So we took advantage of every opportunity. This is at the Brays Bayou in Houston, Texas, during a flood event after Hurricane Patricia's remnants moved over. And finally, as an example, last year in New Jersey, powerful winter storm came up. This camera is at Seaside Heights, and this is the time lapse from that camera. It ran for over 30 hours. We can put them anywhere we want to, and this was really, really fascinating. This is sped up. This is the time lapse. There's the dunes that had been bulldozed up. They're about 5 feet, And the camera's just fastened right there onto the boardwalk at Seaside Heights, which of course was devastated by Sandy in 2012. And in comes the incoming high tide. On top of that, a little bit of a surge pushed by this powerful nor'easter that had worked its way offshore and up the east coast. As the night progressed, the surge and the wave action eroded the dunes down to nothing, so that by the time the peak of the storm had arrived, you'll see it completely flattens the dune system. The water and debris gets in here. It wasn't particularly devastating, but it showed us two things. The camera will work. It'll work in adverse weather conditions. This is kind of like a tropical storm, but about 30 degrees colder. And there it is. You can see the water coming in, the agitation, everything about it. And it was very successful. And it streamed live. We had thousands of people watching on Ustream. And again, I collected the camera boxes when it was over, and we had a successful test. Fast forward to Deweyville, Texas. Last year, significant rainfall along the Sabine River Basin led to this catastrophic flood event for Deweyville. About 1,000 people lived there. So Carrie, one of our colleagues in Houston, Texas, took one of our camera systems, and we used Google Street View to figure out ahead of time where to put it, right in the center of town. And this is a very small town. This is a photo from the Civil Air Patrol. I know it's kind of backlit. So I'll just show you the video. Hopefully this will turn out better. This camera ran for the full 30-something hours, and the Sabine River reached a record crest. This is the real-time video right here. Trees are blowing, and we're kind of dissolving through time here, just clip after clip. Monday afternoon when it was set up, we put our own marker to show how high the water was getting. We told all the residents in the area and the local law enforcement, etc., what was happening so that they could monitor. The water starting to creep in. Again, thousands of people, not always at once, small town again, but news media, the West Gulf River Forecast Center, National Weather Service out of Lake Charles, different FEMA officials tuning in to watch as the water came in. And if you know river flooding, it's a very incessant, slow process, gradually rising. This is not like a flash flood. You have time to evacuate. We know it's coming. And people did that, and they were able to watch the stream as the night progressed and the water came up. Some of the street lights remained on, and as everything progressed, you'll see the next day it's still running. And the audio on this, which will come up in just a moment, was also fascinating to be able to hear what was going on. And in this case, not a lot of people left, thank goodness, they evacuated. But as you'll see the next day, people going by on motorboats in downtown Deweyville. Here's sunrise the next day. Water is up to about 1 foot on our marker. And you can see it's flowing in from the Sabine River gradually. So by the next day, it's just approaching 1 foot where we are. Deeper elsewhere in Deweyville. And you can see there's a little bit of a flow to it. So if this is coming into your house in that area or your business, this is a church over here. This is the post office. It's very problematic, as you can imagine. Now we are over 1 foot. Camera still running just fine, approaching 1.5 feet. And now the water is deep enough that it's really starting to flow in. And then here comes some people walking around. We thought that was interesting. Yep, there they go. That water was still pretty cold. It's in March, and there's all kinds of critters in it. But point is, it worked. It was a very successful test. This is the time lapse of it. If we speed it up, very fast, hundreds of times speed. Here's the water coming in. You see it creeping in from this side. The clouds zipping by. Everything condensed down to about 1.5 minutes. Really, really remarkable. We knew we had something, and it would work for the length of time that we needed. Easy to deploy. We can put it anywhere. And now we just, quote, needed a hurricane. Again, not wishing one on anybody, but if there's going to be one, we want to be there to set up our equipment. And the marker did its job. It was a really good test. All right, so let's just keep moving. It wasn't over. In Texas, they had what was called the Tax Day flood of last year. And if you're in the Houston area, you certainly remember that. So we took a slightly larger camera system, a slightly larger case, slightly larger batteries, not much at all, and increased the runtime to almost 3 days, 72 hours. So Carrie went out and set the cameras up, or the one camera, Some of these rainfall rates in West Houston near Katy were over a foot in a very short period of time. So we put the camera along Maid Creek at Greenhouse, and if you know the Houston area, they have a intricate flood control system run by the Harris County Flood Control District of engineered streams, creeks, and rivers, and they call a lot of these areas bayous, Brays Bayou, so forth and so on, right? And Buffalo Bayou comes to mind, and this one was along Maid Creek at Greenhouse. Now, this particular system unleashed its fury at night. So what were we going to do? We couldn't really see anything. Well, that wasn't entirely true. We were watching on our iPads, and there was so much lightning that we decided we could take still frames, doing the little screen capture with the iPad, to capture it when there was lightning to show something as opposed to nothing. Here's a water pipe that goes across the creek to give you an idea of how fast the water was coming up. Traffic in the early evening hours. As the night went on, the creek level rose, and we were able to share these pictures with Jeff Lindner at Harris County Flood Control District, as well as KPRC, to show them this is what it's like, even though we couldn't see in real-time video. So again, just a great example. There's a bolt itself. Now the road is impassable. Maid Creek has come over Greenhouse, and the camera ran for a couple of days. Carrie went out to pick it up, and it was a very, very good test, all from that little yellow box. So we were ready. Now it was time for hurricane season, and time for me to get a cup of water. Hurricane Hermine would be the first true deployment of the new generation of cameras in September. You remember, stubborn tropical wave that never seemed to want to develop finally did so in the southeast Gulf, turned the corner, and made its way up towards the Big Bend area. I figured I would head down and set up 2 camera systems, one in St. Mark's, the other down in Cedar Key. The one in St. Mark's was not very dramatic, so we're going to skip that. The one in Cedar Key was really impressive. And this area that I have highlighted was forecast to maybe 6 to 9 feet of inundation above ground level from the surge. We see the track of Hermine there, and on the right side of it, anywhere from 6 to 9 feet of inundation above ground level. That was very important. So there's the Tahoe. This is a camera from a local affiliate, probably a Fox station, and there's the camera unit, strapped with zip ties, and then there's a strong steel cable wrapped around it with a lock, so that if somebody tries to steal it, it'll be almost impossible. You can see the lock right there. Or, if it pops off for some reason, it won't just disappear. Very important. So you notice, and I don't have anybody standing here, but this is a little bit higher than eye level for me. I put it about right there. So that's a little bit, close to 6 feet above the ground, the camera is. And here's what it looked like. Some of you saw this as it happened. This was absolutely incredible. The early part of the afternoon, just after I set it up, no problem. Hermine is closing in. It's intensifying, becoming a hurricane. Here's a reporter. I don't know if this was from Fox News or CNN. They were getting ready to do a stand-up, a look-live shot, and they just happened to be standing in front of my remote cam. And then, of course, things get a little bit more wild and wet, and there's a SAT truck in the distance there. And I need to point out that I'm not here anymore. I've already gone back to Tallahassee and gotten a hotel room, and I'm going to be hunkering down for the night. So I'm safe and sound while the camera is doing what the camera was designed to do. The weather gets worse and worse until nightfall. When the waves are coming across the road now, there's no way anybody can be out there. Luckily for us, the lights stayed on, which I still can't understand how, but they did, and so we were able to see a record-setting surge event in Cedar Key, Florida, through the magic of that remote cam. Piers and docks were breaking apart, picnic tables. There's the guy that was standing there earlier, and this is just a long dissolve, no special effects. That dock would have gone right through his heart. Absolutely incredible example of the technology solving a problem of getting a live shot in conditions that would otherwise be impossible to do. So it worked really well. Had thousands and thousands of people watching online on the Weather Channel's Facebook Live. Tens of thousands of people. It was a really monumental event for all of us. 1:30 in the morning, something like that, Eastern. And then this happened. This huge piece of somebody's walkway broke off and drifted into the shot. And we're all sitting there holding our breath, you know, no, 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 no. And it was like, oh, yep, sorry. It bumped the camera out of the zip ties. It didn't break the ties, it just popped it out. And then it was held on now by the steel cable. It got battered around for about 10 minutes, and then something finally popped loose and it went off air. The beauty, now, remember Katrina, where we have to go get the boxes or we lose everything. Not anymore. Through Ustream and the IBM Cloud Video, which is what they're called now, every frame of the video from that camera system is stored no matter what. So I went back, the camera was right where it should be, just dangling from the steel cable. The next day, all was well. Let me go back. So got a pressure reading out while I was out there, the eye of it. If you follow Josh Morgerman, iCyclone, he was also out here. The wind field on the right-hand side, relative to track, was not very impressive, but this business coming down over Tallahassee, Levi Cowan, Tropical Tidbits, he was without power for several days. But where we were, Josh Morgerman and myself, he was somewhere over here, wasn't very impressive wind at all, but I did record a pressure of around 986 millibars for what it's worth. Then we had Matthew. Boy, that was something else. Seems like it just was yesterday. Came across Cat 5 briefly. Terrible death and destruction along Haiti, and it made its way through the Bahamas, and it looked like, for a time, it might come up into the Carolinas directly. It might turn out to sea, kind of like Joaquin did in 2015. Very uncertain times for sure, and it made a very close approach to Florida, so I decided to go to New Smyrna Beach to sort of stake my claim for capturing the best of Matthew, so to speak. However, on the way, I thought I might as well put one of these 3-day cameras along the Charleston Battery just in case, just to be safe, right? Right along the front there, right at the point. Because when I left on Wednesday, October 5th, from North Carolina here, down 17, the forecast took Matthew, the center of it, that is, just off the coast of Charleston, but to the south. So I thought, well, I'll set the camera up along the Battery just in case it changes, right? We'll get back to that. So I set up a camera at the Pelican condominiums right on the ocean front. This is the time lapse from that. You can see the clouds moving in and the ocean responding to it. Everything was working fantastic. No problems at all. Flawless deployment of everything. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Had a lot of people that were helping out that had contacted me on Twitter or email. I don't own this condo. It's not mine. It was a gracious follower, and they were encouraging to help, and it really helped to get things done. Also, set up the anemometer and the weather station right along the bridge here, the South Causeway Bridge that went over the Indian River, and got some incredible data. It's too bad the picture doesn't show up well. Wind speed and pressure, plus the image was coming into our app, Hurricane Impact, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And then, of course, Matthew starts closing in. And you remember that radar was like a hurricane within the hurricane. Our weather data was doing great atop the bridge, about 85 feet above the water. And as time goes on, 6:20 in the evening on Thursday, 20 minutes to midnight on Thursday, wind speeds up now, gusting to tropical storm force as the pressure falls. And then, boy, radar scope. How about radar scope, right? Wow, love it. The hurricane's getting closer. There's my location just south of Daytona Beach. And the power finally goes out. This is now 6:30 in the morning on Friday. This is the eye wall, what's left of it, actually right in here, sort of an outer wind maxima. And there I am waiting for it at the condo in New Smyrna. Oh, what a picture. Hopefully this will show up. It's in our video, which is also on YouTube. The absolute energy getting put into the river there, the waterway, air pressure dropping, winds increasing, hurricanes getting closer. And I mean, for me, this is about 30 miles from the center at the most, but only about 12 to 15 from that western eye wall. And then there's the closest approach right there. I mean, look how close that came to my location. But it gave impressive wind data for us. There's the pressure trace, and then the wind up here are all the hurricane force gusts. Why doesn't it continue? Because I grabbed all the equipment as soon as it was safe for me to do so. I started heading back north, up I-95 around the backside of Matthew, because I knew now the forecast was bringing the center almost into Charleston. And so the surge risk was higher. I thought, I got to get back to that camera and replace the batteries just to be sure. I didn't want to miss it. So I outran the hurricane, and sure enough, that's what was going to happen. A very close approach to Charleston with a landfall just north of there. And I set up the camera, and this is what we got. This is what it looked like before everything got rough and rowdy, probably sometime on Friday. Remember, all the video was stored. And this is what it was like on Saturday morning. Just an amazing shot capturing that surge coming in, the waves crashing over the wall into the harbor there, the wind streaks on the road, the water on top of the road, all this debris flowing in. Not the worst storm surge Charleston has ever seen, certainly, but what kind of a shot. I mean, we've never seen anything like this from this type of shot. There's audio. It's just wind and rain, but there's audio nonetheless. And it's very steady. You think about Jim Cantori. I mean, even Josh Morgerman, and certainly not me. You can't stand there and get a shot like that. It's just too dangerous, and the wind and the rain just keeps pounding on you. It's just not possible. On the way home, I set up a camera in Murrells Inlet, and off I went back to Wilmington. And this is the time lapse. This is really interesting. It's a couple minutes long. This is the Wicked Tuna restaurant parking lot area, and the marina back here, and the Atlantic Ocean's off in the distance across the marsh and the estuary system. And you see all these people early in the morning on Saturday kind of sightseeing, checking things out. But all the while, Matthew's coming up the coast, the center of it, and the surge back here is starting to come up over the bulkhead and spill into the parking lot. So a couple hours later, in the time lapse here, which is just a few seconds, there's whitecaps, as you'll see. You could boogie board on the whitecaps if you wanted to. Wouldn't recommend it, obviously. In the parking lot of the Wicked Tuna in Murrells Inlet. Again, a very steady shot, despite just incredible rain and wind, probably gusting to hurricane force. There's no power in this area, but the self-contained system has all it needs. Battery packs. The cell towers are also mitigated against power outages. There's the water coming in, debris floating, and finally the people get the idea that they shouldn't be there, so they stop driving by, except you'll see one more car. This is salt water. There's a person there. If you drive through salt water, just ask my Tahoe. It starts to wear on you. And there it is. The surge coming into the area. And I just thought, as amazing as this is, we know eventually a very strong hurricane will impact the area where the surge will be up over the first story of that building. And we know that this technology will work. A truly remarkable day for sure. It wasn't over. We had the river flood. Remember, I talked about earlier, people say, well, it's not supposed to hit here. If you live in Kinston, North Carolina, Matthew was not supposed to hit you pretty much all along. You would be correct. Yet, in Kinston, the forecast crest from the Neuse River was going to eclipse the flood of record, which was none other than Floyd 17 years earlier. All from a hurricane that did not hit Kinston. It was the rainfall along and up the Neuse River Basin upstream. So, I went out and set up a camera. I worked with the Lenoir County Emergency Services folks to capture this flood event that eventually went on to break the record set by Floyd. Military vehicles going by to hopefully keep order in the area. Kind of a post-apocalyptic, that's probably a little too embellished of a way to put it, but the fog and everything, it was just really surreal to see and to hear. And, you hear, there's really nothing to hear, just water and birds and crickets. And then military vehicles going by throughout the days. This ran for about 3 days, capturing the flood as it came higher and higher. All of these businesses, the Piggly Wiggly, Neuse Sports Center, King's Barbecue, the Family Dollar, several hotels, flooded, again, from a hurricane that did not hit them directly. This is a lesson here, right here. The hurricane does not have to hit you. It doesn't even have to be a hurricane, just a tropical storm. Think about Allison in 2001. Now, we seem to do a pretty good job covering the hurricanes on the ground. I think we got that down pretty good. Wind data, pressure data, the live feeds, that's all working very well, knock on wood, right? Well, we've had a dream over the last 5 years to do something where we study the hurricane in the vertical, from the surface of the earth, in the eye, all the way to the edge of space at 100,000 feet up. Now, to put that into terms that you can wrap your brain around, a hurricane is roughly 40,000 feet thick in the atmosphere on average, depending on the convective nature at the time. So about 30 to 40,000 feet of clouds. 60,000 feet above that is where we want to send our weather balloon through the eye to the stratosphere and then have it burst because of the low pressure way up here, and then it falls back through the hurricane, again, presumably, collecting data again. But if we're going to do that, why not film it? Put a couple of GoPros on that baby. Here's the sensors, 2 GoPros, one here, and we have the opportunity to do something that no one has ever done before. And it's not crazy, it's not a harebrained idea. It could really, really be interesting to get the profile, just like a sounding. The equipment inside is absolutely state-of-the-art, tested in different projects around the world that measure upper atmospheric phenomenon. This tiny little computer chip records, it's called the Eagle Flight Computer, not only the GPS data, but air pressure, temperature, and humidity every 6 seconds on a micro SD card, temperature, humidity, pressure. It also has a built-in APRS transmitter for amateur radio beaconing. Absolutely incredible, and it all runs on little AAA batteries. No problem. So we have to test it, right? This is the test. We've done 5 of them, 4 or 5, whatever it is, over the last several years, beginning in 2012. This is the one that we did in Kansas last year, last June. Greg Nordstrom from Mississippi State University filming this for us from the ground. He helps out with the meteorology and the upper air patterns. This is the GoPro video. Greg will be joining us this year to help in the field. We're looking forward to that. Up it goes, the up camera facing the sky. Fairly steady considering we're going up through the atmosphere, through the boundary layer where the winds can be variable, obviously. Finally, the balloon gets higher and higher, and we look down on the earth. And you can imagine doing this in a hurricane, what that's going to be like. To see down across the spiral bands, coming out of the eye. Oh, the view, it's just going to be incredible. But we have to do it. It's easy to do the testing in Kansas because it pops, it falls, we go get it. It's easy. We go get a steak dinner after to celebrate. In a hurricane, it's going to be darn tough. You know it is. We got to get the eye to come over us. We have to get everything ready in 10 minutes or less, launch it, hope that it clears the eye, and then find it when it falls back to the earth to show everybody what we got. It's the world's greatest geocache. But it does. It floats back down via parachute, and it beacons every couple of minutes, telling us where it's located, not only in the air, but once it hits the ground, it tells us exactly where it is. It's probably not going to land in a cornfield in a hurricane situation, so we're going to have our work cut out for us. All right, so how are we funded? How do we pay for all of this? It's like, hey man, is Bruce Wayne on your foundation? That's a little Batman joke for you. Well, I wish he was, somewhat, right? That would be nice, but we are supported. It's a long story. Over the years, we've had sponsorships and partnerships, but things change, and now it's a lot more like crowdfunding and other ways, like public radio. If you listen to public radio, it's viewer supported or member supported by the people who consume it. But yeah, we've had individuals, corporate underwriters, etc. If you ever have any questions about that, you can send me an email. Be glad to talk to you. But what I want to show you, though, and this is important because we want to be able to do this, 90% of what we do, we don't charge a dime for. Nothing at all. It's free. Almost all of the live video is now available for free. the video updates. It's pretty much all available at absolutely no cost. But if you do want to help out, we have a Patreon set up where you can become one of our patrons, a new crowdfunding idea. So you can go to hurricanetrack.com and check that out. We do have our own subscription service that's been set up now for over 10 years that has an interactive chat. It's a really nice community, and we do have ways that you can help us out. That's kind of what I'm getting at. One of the things I want to talk about the most, though, where not only will it help us what we do with funding, but it really does give you something back, is our app, Hurricane Impact. It's mainly an iOS tool. Eventually, it is available on Android, but it's got some issues. It's hard to keep up with it, especially when you don't have the funds. So we've put more funding into the iOS version and kept it up to date the most. And that's what, well, you have to spend money to make money, right? So what is the app all about? Well, it's got everything we do aggregated into the app. It's fantastic. The live video, the blog, the Twitter, all right there in the app. All the video discussions, if you're following on YouTube, they go to the app as well. You just pull down to refresh and you get the latest video the moment that it hits the YouTube system. It's really nice. Live weather data, I was showing you that earlier. And this is changing for 2017. It'll be a live feed from one of our camera systems, and then the wind speed will have one additional layer to it right here. Instantaneous wind readings from the anemometer every single second. You'll see it streaming in. I tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago. So it'll read, just think about it, it'll say like 12, 14, 17, 9, 12, whatever. And then every minute you'll get an average, which is what we post now, and then a peak gust for that minute. Watching real-time wind data live in the app is coming to Hurricane Impact this year. Live camera systems, we started this during Matthews when we rolled it out. Boy, that was a great timing to get this rolled out. Literally right in the app, you can watch our live feeds as they come in, and we'll have that again for this year. Oh, that was something else. We got a lot of favorable comments from people all over the world with that, and so that's all in the app, Hurricane Impact. I want to show you something. Sometimes, after the storm, the cameras keep running. And you get people that drop by and, hey, what is that? Sort of the latter side of this whole process. I'm not sure what they're looking for, but they're digging for something there. This is the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew along the Charleston Battery. I still haven't figured out what they were looking for. Maybe they dropped their iPhone. I don't know. But the camera kept going and going and going. I couldn't get back to Charleston for several days, but the camera kept running, and somebody else comes over, and they're trying to look at it, and this guy's like, I don't know I don't know if it was fish, if it was a snake. You know, was there an alligator there? I don't know what it was. He's fanning it. Maybe it was ants. He's trying to get something out of the water to scurry along maybe. But just really, really like the sociological aspect of the aftermath of a hurricane. Now you get, you good-looking guys walking through the shot, I guess. Why not, right? If you've got it, flaunt it. And sometimes I'm not sure what people are thinking. But wait, it's not over yet. Hey, look, it's Aquaman. Howdy. Yep, that's the, hey, you know what? Sometimes you gotta laugh because this is a very serious thing. It's day one of what could be a very long hurricane season. And 183 days from now, what are we going to be talking about? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows that for sure. But what I can tell you with absolute certainty is that we're going to cover it the best that we can possibly do. We've got amazing technology. I've got over 20 years of experience writing, the video production of the video updates, and then of course we take you out into the field. You think about these different, only the Weather Channel can say that. CNN, I guess, but CNN, the Fox Newses of the world, they cover other news. To be able to do something similar to the Weather Channel with their prowess in the field, with our small team and shoestring budget, I think says a lot to my team's dedication. It's not just me, As I mentioned, we'll have Greg Nordstrom from Mississippi State, and we'll have Carrie Mallory from Texas will be helping out, and other people contribute as well with ideas and help behind the scenes. It's a team effort. I'm kind of like the lead singer of the band. We definitely have good drummer, good background people, producers, etc. that help make it happen behind the scenes. So, in summary, and kind of trying to wrap this up, we don't know what's going to happen between now and November 30th, but the thing I want to leave you with the most is it's been a long time since we've had a Category 3 or higher, a truly significant, really dangerous, bad hurricane like Katrina or Wilma. I mean, not to diminish what the others have brought us, Sandy, Matthew last year as examples, but one that changes everything, where we look at life as before and after said hurricane. We haven't had that since 2 years before the iPhone was even invented. Take it upon yourself to learn what you can, especially if you're new to an area. If you know somebody that is new to an area that has no hurricane experience, it is very stressful. It's stressful for me. Oh, poor Mark. It is stressful for me just to get ready to go to one of these. And I always hope, believe it or not, that they don't hit in Wilmington where I live, because I know, and I know you don't believe me, but it's true. People say all the time, oh man, it's coming to Wilmington, you must be delighted. The contrary, absolutely. It's a horrible thing to go through to get your house ready, the aftermath. You know, you survive the storm, but it's that aftermath that lingers. And I know that sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't realize that. They get caught up in the excitement, and it is exciting. I saw some tweets today that, why are people excited about hurricane season? Excitement doesn't necessarily mean it's a positive thing. If armed bandits burst through the door here and came into my office, it would inherently be exciting, but quite negative, wouldn't you say? And so the same thing applies to hurricanes. We get excited about them, and for reasons that a lot of us don't even understand, because it's a phenomenon probably a lot bigger than us, and we give them names, for goodness sakes. So we have to respect them. We have to do what we can to learn about the hazards. Reach out to others if you have no experience yourself to gather that experience from them, and then find trusted sources. I'm one of them. I'm glad to be one of them. I think that's a great responsibility, but there are others out there. Resist the whole fake news. My goodness, can you imagine when we are faced with a massive hurricane again, like Katrina, how much misinformation is going to be out there? That old Spider-Man phrase from the original reboot back in the 2000s, great power comes great responsibility. Well, that's true. We have this amazing power with social media, but we have to remember, take a deep breath and make sure that what we're reading even sounds feasible. Don't share something that seems too incredible to be true. Be careful with those spreading of wildfires among social media. What is it going to be like in 183 days? Well, I guess we're going to find out together. And like I said, we'll cover it the best that we can. I will be doing the daily video briefings. My setup is over here just off the screen, and I'll post that. Sometimes I'll take a vacation when things are absolutely dead and the Saharan air layer has covered the tropics with dry, stable air. I'll be out of here for a few days to get some R&R somewhere at the beach or something. Other than that, I'll be here on top of it, and I look forward to having you with me as well. All right, so I'm going to jump off here, see what the comments are on Facebook Live and on YouTube. I do appreciate you tuning in. It's a privilege to be able to do this, and I value everybody that has contributed. Even just the slightest comment of thank you is much appreciated. All right, it's day one now. We'll get together again on day 183 on November 30th, and we'll see what we talk about then. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you later on.